the anime Gate, the Japanese self-defense forces easily destroy the empire's medieval army using modern weapons, vehicles, and all the other advantages of advanced technology, while the anime itself is very interesting and really fun to watch. Some parts still feel a bit unrealistic. For example, the main character Itami happily helps all the local residents, and many situations are resolved way too smoothly. But let's imagine what would happen if the gates had opened not in Japan, but in the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union at that time was one of the strongest countries in the world. It had enormous experience in conquest and warfare, having just gone through the horrors of World War II. It was right in the middle of the Cold War with the United States and was actively exploring space. Would the Soviet Union be able to quickly and ruthlessly crush an invasion from another world? Of course, it would.
Передаем важное правительственное сообщение. Граждане и гражданки Советского Союза. Сегодня в 4 часа утра, без всякого объявления войны, германские вооруженные силы атаковали границы Советского Союза.
It was a warm summer evening in the small peaceful town of Stepnogorsk, Kazakh SSR, July 1981. People were enjoying their usual Soviet life. Children played football near the panel apartment blocks. Old men sat on benches, arguing about hockey and the latest harvest. Women carried heavy bags from the market, while the smell of shashlik and fresh bread filled the air. A red banner with Lenin fluttered quietly above the central square. Everything was calm, ordinary, typically Soviet. Then, without any warning, the sky tore apart. A massive ancient gate, glowing with unnatural blue light, materialized right in the middle of the central square. Stone arches covered in strange runes, bigger than anything anyone had ever seen. For a few seconds, people just stared in shock. Someone dropped their ice cream, a babushka crossed herself, and then they came. Hundreds of imperial soldiers on horseback, knights in shining armor, followed by orcs, goblins, and giant wyverns in the sky. They poured out of the gate like a medieval flood, swords drawn, spears raised, screaming battle cries in an unknown language. The first moments were pure slaughter. Arrows and magic fireballs rained down on the unarmed crowd. In principle, all the early events unfold exactly like in the anime. Several hundred residents die in the initial attack, and the army from another world manages to capture some new territory, but only up to a certain point. Because this is not some small pacifist Japan, a country still weakened after World War II with nothing but lightly armed self-defense forces. No, this time the gates opened in a real superpower, at the peak of its strength. This is the Soviet Union. After the first minutes of chaos in the central square of Stepnogorsk, when the Imperial Knights and Mages had already killed several dozen civilians, the situation began to change very quickly. Local police officers opened fire with pistols. Several knights fell, but this only enraged the attackers. In the first 15 to 20 minutes, around 80 to 120 people were killed, mostly women, children, and elderly who had been on the square. The Soviet leadership would most likely not hesitate, because this is not Japan. In the anime, for example, the Japanese government took several months to make a decision, while the rest of the world was watching and putting pressure on them. In reality, Japan was not acting independently. Their actions were coordinated with the United Nations and other countries, and only after a few months did they decide to fully investigate the gate, build a base, and capture Alnus Hill. But in this case, it is the Soviet Union. During that time, there was no internet and no modern communication, which made it much easier to keep something like this a secret. The Soviet Union could act completely independently without informing other countries. Because of this, martial law would most likely be declared immediately. Civilians would be told that it was a large-scale military exercise, while affected families would receive compensation, new apartments, and access to education in the typical style of the Soviet system. At the same time, they would be required to sign non-disclosure agreements, since everything would be classified as a state secret. Immediately after the attack by forces from another world on Stepnogorsk in July 1981, the Soviet leadership reacted swiftly and decisively. Within a few hours, the top officials of the Soviet government held an emergency meeting in the Kremlin. A decision was made quickly. Stepnogorsk was declared a special closed territory of strategic importance, a top-secret facility of the highest classification. Over the next day, a partial evacuation of civilians began. Women, children, and the elderly were sent to nearby cities under the excuse of military exercises. Men of draft age and essential workers stayed, guarded, and under strict secrecy. The city was put under martial law. Apartment blocks and schools were quickly turned into barracks, command centers, and storage. Buildings that once housed families became strategic facilities, command posts, communication hubs, and temporary hospitals. Around the portal in the city center, military bases were built fast. Engineers worked non-stop, digging trenches, setting up mines, barbed wire, and anti-aircraft positions. Within a week, permanent fortifications, artillery, and helicopter pads were ready. After the portal opened in Stepnogorsk, the Soviet leadership saw not just a threat, but a huge opportunity: new lands, new resources, new strategic advantages. At the same time, the war in Afghanistan was becoming too costly, so the USSR made a fast decision to shift its focus. Troops and resources began to move away from Afghanistan and toward the new operation. Even parts of the space program were reduced to support it. Everything was redirected to one goal: securing Alnus Hill, a key position beyond the portal. Just 2 days after the attack, Soviet forces began their first major operation. Columns of tanks, infantry vehicles, artillery, and engineers moved through the gate. Let's be honest, did the Empire ever stand a chance? Even if they threw 1 million soldiers at the portal, it wouldn't change anything. A giant dragon? Impressive, sure. It could burn armies alive, but send 2 MiG-23 fighters from 1981 against it. Game over. In the anime, a single RPG already wrecked one's arm. Soviet jet fighters with missiles and autocannons would tear it apart in seconds. The battle for Alnus Hill ended in total humiliation for the Empire. Soviet forces seized the hill in just a few hours. Construction of a massive military base began immediately. They named it Krasnaya Zvezda, Red Star Forward Base. After securing the position, the Soviets followed a similar path to the anime, but far more ruthless. They explored the territory, searched for valuable resources, and systematically crushed any resistance from the imperial government. Their ultimate plan was clear: completely subdue the special region and slowly turn its people into proper Soviet comrades.